Welcome to the Gray Area Podcast live. It is Monday, January 8th, 2024. It's your man, Kevin Gray. Appreciate you joining me here on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to my podcast, the Gray Area Podcast, wherever you get podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. You can also check me out on Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. I'm, of course, your Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks radio network. We'll get into the Mavs a little bit later on as they're rolling right now, having won 3 straight thanks to Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Kyrie doing veteran leader guy stuff these days. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports, same on Facebook and on Instagram. Let me know that you are in the chat as well. You can throw in a comment in there. I'll definitely throw it up on the screen, and we can read it, chat about it, talk about it. If you want to throw in a super chat as well to make sure your stuff gets seen and read, I have no problem with that either. And, of course, we're going to be hanging out for a little bit today here on this Monday, National Championship Monday. Michigan, Washington, winner wins the national championship. That game is in Houston later on tonight. Jim Harbaugh could be riding off into the sunset as a national championship winner, could be headed back to the National Football League for all we know, as we know that there are several head coaching jobs that are open, including in Carolina. They got a job opening. Atlanta, Arthur Smith, we'll see you later. Also in Washington, our nation's capital, where Ron Rivera was fired the day after his birthday. That is because, in part, the Cowboys took care of business on Sunday afternoon in Washington. They get a 38-10 win over the Commanders to clinch the NFC East and the number 2 seed. If you had told me, almost 2 months ago that the Cowboys would have the number 2 seed, have a chance to host 2 playoff games at AT&T Stadium and win the NFC East, where, of course, now, since 2005, there hasn't been a back-to-back winner of the NFC East, I would have told you lost your mind. That's because the Philadelphia Eagles at the time were getting away with it in Kansas City, where Marquez Valdez-Scantling couldn't catch a cold, and, of course, dropped the pass that would have had the Chiefs beating the Eagles on that fateful Monday night. But such as it happens to be, the Eagles got crushed by the Giants on the final week of the season. This is after, of course, they lost to the Arizona Cardinals. Shout out to Kyler Murray, Allen High School's own Chris Arnold. Kyler Murray. And now the Cowboys sit here getting ready to host. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the Green Bay Packers on Sunday afternoon in Wild Card Weekend. Now, shout out to Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. They won on this past weekend to get themselves into the playoffs in a win and you're in situation. They did, and one of the youngest teams in the NFL is in the playoffs. Matt LaFleur doing a good job with that team, getting them into the postseason. But this is all about Dallas. Dallas, who we thought coming into this year was going to be built on their defense, the strength of their football team being Dan Quinn's defense led by Micah Parsons, found out real quick that, hey, man, this whole Dak Prescott thing, we might need to lean on that, and we might need to have him take us to where we want to go. And Dak Prescott, who last year, of course, led the NFL in interceptions, missed 5 games due to a broken thumb, comes back this year, is even better in Mike McCarthy's Texas West Coast offense, however you want to call it. He throws for over 30 touchdowns, leads the NFL in touchdowns this year. He has CeeDee Lamb becoming a bona fide number 1 wide receiver, breaking the Cowboys record for receiving yards and catches in a season. CeeDee had another 13 catches for nearly 100 yards yesterday with a couple of touchdowns. So he has been fantastic for this football team, becoming a first-team All-Pro selection in my mind. Dak Prescott, another spectacular year, a career year for him, bouncing back after the difficulties with the turnovers last year. Dak reminding us, though, look, this is who he's been. Last year, as I've said previously, was an anomaly. Yeah, you don't want to have your quarterback turn the ball over as much as Dak Prescott did, but if you go back and look at some of the interceptions that he had, it wasn't my man's fault, but yet they get counted on his ledger. That's another conversation for another day. But here the Cowboys are sitting here with a chance, with things set up now, Jimmy Johnson, thanks to that curse being lifted, to make a real legitimate run at a Super Bowl, trying to get back to the NFC title game for the first time in nearly 3 decades. And for Mike McCarthy A man who has now won 36 games in each over the last 3 seasons, 12 wins in each of the last 3 seasons, is 21 games over 500 at 36-15. Now has a chance to add yet another piece to the puzzle by making a deep playoff run. And if this were any other team than the Dallas Cowboys, we would look at what the Cowboys have done over the last 3 seasons and say, oh, yeah, that's a program that's building over there towards something special as they continue to get better year in and year out. Because think about it. Over the last 3 seasons, you lose in the wild card round. You then find a way to lose in the divisional round to the San Francisco 49ers for a second year in a row. After losing in Santa Clara the first time, or losing in Dallas the first time, you lose in Santa Clara the next time, but in the divisional round. And now you're looking to take the next step forward this year. And if things break your way, you may find yourself, if you handle your own business, Dallas, hosting the NFC Championship game. And while we thought that could be a possibility this season, the road in which they've traveled to get here, not the one that we necessarily expected. A team that couldn't hardly win on the road this year. They beat up on a bunch of bad football teams, but when they decided to play some good ones, for the most part, they couldn't handle business. See Buffalo on the road, see Miami on the road. You got to help from the referee guides against the Detroit Lions, and you got away with it there. You take it. But now all that is out of the way. What you now do forward for the Cowboys is all that matters. And it's a road and a future that becomes a little more murky depending on what happens this postseason. You say, Kevin, what the hell are you talking about? Well, as I nearly choke, you look at what the Cowboys are having to deal with here. Number one, Dak Prescott needs a new deal. Number two, Micah Parsons has earned a new deal. Number three, CeeDee Lamb has also earned a new deal. There are questions about whether or not Tony Pollard will be back with this team this upcoming next season. The questions about whether or not Michael Gallup will be back this upcoming next season. Leighton Vander Esch may not be back with this team. He may have to be forced into retirement. Dan Quinn may not be back either, depending on what happens, because how many times, and here's the question that I have for Cowboys fans, how many more times will Dan Quinn continue to say no to head coaching opportunities each time they come knocking on his door? Because they are going to continue to knock on his door. Dan Quinn has revitalized this defense over the last few seasons and has it as one of the better units in the NFL, playing at the kind of level that they need to going into the postseason. I don't know, even with Jerry Jones's deep pockets, how much more Dan Quinn can continue to say, nah, I'm going to stick here in Dallas and remain a defensive coordinator. Remember, there's only 32 jobs in the NFL for head coaches. If you have a chance to be able to be a head coach once again, and David Moore's reporting from the Dallas Morning News suggests that Dan Quinn may be able to listen, maybe more willing to listen to offers this time around than he has in the past few years if the right one comes his way. Who's to say that that won't necessarily happen this time around, given the fact, especially if this team gets to the NFC title game and beyond. Dan Quinn may have felt like if he gets that far with this team that he has done what he is supposed to do. Well, yeah, there's no cap on how much you can pay coaches. It becomes very difficult for you to continue to keep a guy like Dan Quinn in his defensive coordinator position, which gets me back to Mike McCarthy. McCarthy has been extremely successful, especially the last 3 seasons, as I detailed a little bit earlier. But if he can't get this team after all the changes that he's made, because remember, he didn't want Kellen Moore around. He's like, look, I'm going to take control of this offense. I think I could do a little bit better with Dak Prescott and leading this offensive charge. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And he did. And to the tune of Dak Prescott's best year of his entire career. He got rid of Kellen Moore. He took over the reins and made sure that he was going to be the one that made the decisions around here. And if that doesn't turn into an NFC Championship game or beyond, I think that he may be gone. Now, ultimately, I do think he remains in Dallas. Now, Jerry Jones said after the game on Sunday, we'll see how it goes, especially as this postseason rolls on. I do think Mike McCarthy will be back, but I will not be shocked if he is ultimately dismissed here, because at what point do you continue to spin your wheels with Mike McCarthy as your head coach? His resume says that he knows how to get this done in January and beyond. Now it's time, with arguably its most talented team over the past 3 seasons, to do that. You brought in Brandon Cooks. You brought in Stephon Gilmore. You brought these individuals and veterans in for such a time as this, as I get my preacher on. And if Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks and others who have been brought to this team cannot help get the Cowboys over the hump, who knows what the future of this team looks like. And all of this, whether it be for Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, take your pick of Cowboy, who's your favorite. They know that the pressure is on to have to try and win a championship, not because necessarily, that's what the Cowboys believe their birthright is, but because of how different this team could look going forward after this season has concluded. When you have other teams that you're looking at across the NFC that could be improving and getting better based off of what we're seeing going into the playoffs. But this is all about Dallas. This is about Jerry Jones. This is about Stephen Jones. Hell, it's even about Will McClay. Will McClay, who, yes, is the de facto general manager here in Dallas, has put together terrific rosters over the last several years. This is also going to be a referendum on him and whether or not the group that he has decided Jerry, and Stephen Jones have made their core of their football team are going to be the ones to carry this future forward for Dallas. Because if they are, okay, no harm, no foul. But if they are not, changes could be coming for this roster. Regardless, changes will come anyway because rosters turn over, period. But for the Cowboys, based off of what they've done now, each of the last 3 years, models of consistency where they've won 12 games for 3 years in a row, something they haven't done since the early 90s when, they were winning Super Bowls. This is a chance to show that all the work that they've put in, everything and every conversation that's surrounded this football team, whether you're a hater of Dak, whether you're a naysayer of Dak, or otherwise, this is a chance and a proving ground for them to show us and everybody else around them they're good for it this time around. Because one thing that a Cowboy fan is sick and tired of seeing is the Cowboys trying to say what they are and then going out and proving otherwise based on not getting the results that they said that they would get because of the talent that was in the room. That won't fly anymore. Everything has been laid out for this team. It is all in front of them to take advantage of. From the curse being lifted, from Jimmy Johnson being put into the Ring of Honor, to Dak Prescott having a bounce-back year, to Micah Parsons being a first-team All-Pro, the emergence of a new 88 as being a number one wide receiver in this league, to a defense led by a guy that most feels one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, and a coach who has won a Super Bowl at AT&T Stadium, now has a chance against the Green Bay Packers to help Dak Prescott get a measure of revenge. That is what's in front of this team, and specifically for Dak Prescott, because let me take it here. The Cowboys are the number 2 seed, right? In the Dak Prescott era, they've only been the 2 seed or higher once, and that was Dak Prescott's rookie year in 2016, where, of course, they were the number 1 seed. They went 13-3 during that magical rookie year for both Dak and Zeke Elliott. Now they have a chance, Dak Prescott does, that is, to right a wrong that he feels like should have never happened. Remember, he went toe-to-toe with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers in the divisional round, ultimately losing, of course, Aaron Rodgers to Jared Cook. But anyway, Dak Prescott now, with Mike McCarthy by his side, has a chance to be able to get some revenge. We'll see if he can. Shout out to Jonathan Duncan. It's starting to look like all the local teams have a chance to win a championship this year. Stephen A. Smith is being very quiet. I mean, Stephen A. is a closet Cowboys fan. I've always believed this. I've always said this, and will continue to believe it moving forward. I believe that Stephen A. Smith is a Cowboys fan. You can't tell me otherwise. But you're right. Shout out to the Texas Rangers. They, of course, your World Series champion. The Dallas Cowboys have a chance with things set up where they are right now to make a deep playoff run. The Dallas Mavericks, hey, they've won 3 straight. They're playing some pretty good basketball right now. And the Stars, they're really good too. So shout out to DFW Sports on a little bit of a run right now. But it all doesn't matter. As much as people love the Rangers, as much as people love the Mavericks, and the Stars. Shout out to FC Dallas. There is one title that this state is desperate for. Not just DFW, not just the Metroplex, that this state is desperate for. Even if you're a Texans fan, the Cowboys winning a Super Bowl. Just imagine the parade of when the Dallas Cowboys finally deliver a championship to not just this city, not just this area, not just the region, but for this state in general. And then, of course, the national conversation that goes around this team. It will be nuts. And could you imagine, speaking to Stephen A., could you imagine Stephen A. Smith having to get on First Take the Monday after the Super Bowl, having to discuss the Cowboys as Super Bowl champions? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that there is now a real possibility for that to happen because, again, this has been set up for the Cowboys to make a special run at it. If they don't, oh boy, you and I are not going to have pleasant conversations here on the gray area. We're just not. Because as you can see, and as you can hear in my voice, yeah, the Cowboys, it's time for them to handle business. But good on them. They took care of business on the road. They beat down the Commanders. They sent Ron Rivera packing, although they didn't need a loss to send Ron Rivera packing after how things went bad for him over the last year or so. But now the Cowboys have a chance to take it themselves. Carpe Omnia, their magical slogan all season long. Seize everything. They better seize a playoff win starting on Sunday. Otherwise, if they don't, yikes. Cowboys take on the Packers on Sunday afternoon at AT&T Stadium at 3:30. Not playing on the Monday game. That distinction belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Speaking of which, the NFL script was on fire this weekend because while, yes, you got the juicy, sexy matchup between, the Cowboys and the Packers. That's going to do a monster rating, by the way. Shout out to Fox. And by the way, real quick note, I'm sure Kevin Burkhardt, Greg Olsen, Tom Rinaldi, and Aaron Andrews are about sick of seeing the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe not because they get monster ratings. But my point is they feel like they've been traveling with this team all season long. They'll be on the call, of course, on Fox on Sunday afternoon. They might as well just put a place in Arlington or in Dallas or wherever and just said, you know what, we're the official broadcast team of the Dallas Cowboys because they do every single Cowboys game, it feels like. They'll be in the house again on Sunday. But some of the other matchups that you got going into Wildcard Weekend, again, this is the Gray Area Live podcast here on Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. Make sure you throw in a comment. You can throw a super chat in there as well if you want to make sure that your comment is seen and heard and read here on the Gray Area. Let's look at some of these other matchups because, oh boy, I love the way that things got set up in both the AFC and the NFC playoffs. I'm going to start in the NFC because obviously, that's where I reside. And you've got the Cowboys, Packers. You've got the Rams and the Lions. Shout out to the NFL script that took this one to Hollywood and said, hey, how about if we put Jared Goff against the Los Angeles Rams and then put Matthew Stafford versus the Detroit Lions in the ultimate QB revenge game where, of course, the two were traded for one another. Matthew Stafford winds up winning a Super Bowl with Sean McVay in Los Angeles. Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions now have won their first division championship in 30 years, and now they get to host the 6th seed Los Angeles Rams on Sunday evening in the Motor City. Detroit, good football team. Offensively, Ben Johnson's been really good as their offensive coordinator. Got two good backs with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They've got a monster pass rusher in Aiden Hutchinson. Shout out to Michigan as they get ready to play for the national championship tonight against Washington in Houston. They've got some good talent over there in Detroit. The question is, in a game where I don't know if they'll be favored to win or not, takes on a team in the Los Angeles Rams that low-key, kind of glad the Cowboys aren't seeing in Wildcard Weekend because the Rams and the other team in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills, those are the two proverbial, you don't want to see those teams in the playoffs. The Rams, who got a guy in Puka Nacua who broke the rookie receiving yards record this year, got a really nice running back in Kyron Williams, and Matthew Stafford's been playing at a really nice level this year. You don't want to mess around with the Los Angeles Rams. And, oh, by the way, that's right, they still got Aaron Donald running around in Los Angeles. So if you're Detroit, a team that isn't necessarily good against the pass and hasn't been good against the pass all season long, despite the fact that Aaron Glenn's their defensive coordinator, they could be in for some real trouble against the Rams on Sunday evening. I'm going to pick the Rams in that game because, again, I'm not trying to see Sean McVay's offense walk into my building with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, and a good offense that can really put points on you in a hurry against a pass defense that ain't good. And Detroit, they're the team. Look, man, they've got their cute story, won first division championship in 30 years. I don't know if they're ready necessarily for this moment. Matthew Stafford and the experience of the Rams has been there, done that. And you give Sean McVay a lot of credit, too, for putting this team in position to be able to be back in the playoffs. Despite what they've gone through over the last couple of years, they're now back in the postseason. I'm going to take the Rams to win that game against Detroit. But that should be a lot of fun. Again, NFL script writers, they knew what they were doing, putting this one together. And then you go to Philadelphia. You want to talk about a horror story right now. That's what the Philadelphia Eagles are. They, after a 10-1 start, look like trash right now. And after Jalen Hurts got hurt, A.J. Brown got hurt in their season finale against the Giants, where they got whooped by the G-men, they limp into the playoffs taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneer team that, hey, quiet as it's kept now, they've won the NFC South each of the last 3 years. Now you say, Kevin, now hold on. Even in Tom Brady's final year when they won it, where Dak Prescott sent the Tampa Bay Buccaneers packing last postseason, they were under 500 winning the division. That's not the case this year. Baker Mayfield has found himself a home in Tampa. They've won the division for the third straight year. Mike Evans is still balling there. And they've got a team that, if you look at them taking on an Eagles team right now, you would think, based on the talent that Philadelphia has, that they should have enough to win. I don't know, man. I don't know. Let me know how you feel. I don't know. I guess for posterity, I'm taking the Philadelphia Eagles. I do think that ultimately they're the better team. They should win this game, but I'm not putting it past Tampa to beat them and send Philadelphia packing. And if Philadelphia loses to Tampa Bay after starting off the year 10-1 and us thinking, oh, this might be the team that could get back to the Super Bowl, low key, if you go back and look at the way that they've won games this year, they got away with it quite a bit. I was not ready to take it there and call the Philadelphia Eagles of the 2023 campaign the Minnesota Vikings of 2022, because remember, Minnesota got away with it. It felt like every single week. But as the season went on, you looked around and you were like, are we sure this isn't the team like Minnesota from a year ago that just kept getting away with it all the time? Because Philadelphia felt that way. They couldn't get away with it toward the end of the regular season because they fell apart. And questions about leadership with A.J. Brown, Nick Sirianni under fire in Philadelphia. Things have taken a turn for the worse there for the Philadelphia Eagles. So we'll see what happens in Tampa, but I'm gonna pick Philadelphia. I know that's not good business based on what I got on, but I'm gonna take Philadelphia to win that game. And of course, San Francisco is San Francisco. They're gonna be sitting there getting healthy, watching all this unfold as they wait what happens for them going into the divisional round. San Francisco, when they're healthy, best team in football. Then there's the AFC. AFC was cooking here with these matchups. Let's look at it. Let's start on Saturday. You got the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. Shout out to DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud. I absolutely love the fact that DeMeco Ryans took this job, a job that it feels like nobody in the NFL wants to take. He embraced it as a former player in Houston, comes back in his rookie year, take this team, and they win the division after Gardner Minshew and Goodson couldn't complete the pass to try and win the game to get into the playoffs. Texans win. Then they watch themselves get in to the playoffs after Jacksonville blows it on the road against the Tennessee Titans, where Derrick Henry's waving goodbye to the Tennessee Titan faithful after 8 years there because, he's not going to be back there next year. But Trevor Lawrence, because, hey, we're looking at Trevor Lawrence with a lot of side eye right now. Like, hey, man, after an 8-3 start, you lose 5 of your last 6, and you can't get into the playoffs. Yeah, man, the Texans saw the football god smile on them. They win the AFC South, which means they now get to host the Cleveland Browns and 85-year-old Joe Flacco, who was just sitting on his mama's couch just about 6-7 weeks ago, and now all of a sudden is leading the Browns to Houston, where that's right, Deshaun Watson used to play quarterback there. So now, no Deshaun Watson, of course, the $230 million man, sitting at home, injured, not able to play this postseason, is going to watch his team walk into his old stomping grounds with Joe Flacco to try and beat the Houston Texans. And if that is the case, whoo boy, could you imagine if the Cleveland Browns, depending on how things shake out here, if the Cleveland Browns found a way to get to Baltimore, because here's how things are set up right now. The Miami Dolphins are visiting the Kansas City Chiefs. By virtue of Miami losing to Buffalo on Sunday Night Football, that means Buffalo is the 2 seed. They've won 5 straight. They're whooping people left and right. Hello, Dallas. And now find themselves as the 2 seed getting ready to host Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who somehow woke up Mason Rudolph out of the dust and helped him get this team into the postseason. They're the 7 seed taking on the Buffalo Bills. But before I get there, let me go back to Kansas City. Again, NFL scriptwriters on fire. Tyreek Hill and the Miami Dolphins now go to Kansas City. Don't you think that Patrick Mahomes would love to have Tyreek Hill right about now? Because his receivers can't catch. They can't do anything. They can't line up on side right. They can't do anything right. The only person worth a damn catching the football in Kansas City right now is Travis Kelce. And every now and then he out here dropping the football. The most dependable wide receiver, quote unquote, that they have right now probably is Rashee Rice. And that's not necessarily great because he's a rookie. So here's the thing with Kansas City. Are you willing to bet against Patrick Mahomes? Let me know. Are you willing to bet against Patrick Mahomes? Because low-key, that offense isn't good. It's not good at all. Even with all the heroics that we've seen Patrick Mahomes throughout the course of his career, that team offensively is not good. And low-key might be missing Eric Bieniemy. Of course, that was the guy that kept them all accountable and kept that offense, it feels like, afloat based on what we've seen so far this year. But the Miami Dolphins, the fastest team in the NFL, now walks in with Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa, and an offense that's got a really good run game with Devon Achane. Can Miami find a way on Saturday night to take out Kansas City? I think they might. Now, granted, Patrick Mahomes has never played a road game in his entire postseason career. Never played a road game. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's so crazy to think that Patrick Mahomes, through all the playoff success that he's had, has never played a playoff game outside of Arrowhead Stadium. That may still be the case this season if Miami walks into Arrowhead and beats them on Saturday night, and they've got a good shot to do it because I don't know. Look, Kansas City secondary is pretty good. I will say that. L'Jarius Sneed, they've got some good players in that secondary. O.J. McDuffie, they've got some good players there. Miami is really fast, and they're really good. We'll see if they can take out Kansas City. Then that gets me to Pittsburgh and Buffalo. Buffalo has won 5 straight games. Pittsburgh found a way over the last month of the year to get it together with Mason Rudolph as their starting quarterback, but they're dealing with the fact that T.J. Watt now has got a grade 2 MCL sprain and won't be available for this game on Sunday against Buffalo. That may spell the end for the Pittsburgh Steelers in their season, where Mike Tomlin now through 17 seasons has never had a losing season in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin can coach my team any point on any given Sunday and on the occasional Monday, Thursday, or whatever they're playing football these days. They're the team that just feels like no matter what you do, no matter how much you ride them off, they always find a way to get themselves back into this position, and here they are. But they're going to lose to Buffalo on Sunday. I'm sorry. I told you how the Rams are the proverbial you don't want to see them team in the postseason. That's what the Buffalo Bills are. Because here's the thing about Buffalo, right? Josh Allen could give you that 30 for 40, 450, 4 touchdowns, runs for another one, runs for 50 yards, and plays Superman all day long. He's also the guy that can go 25 of 50 for 220, throw 3 interceptions, run for 30 yards, fumble it. He's the antithesis of good, bad. There's no in between for him. I think you're going to get the good Josh Allen that we've seen over the last month or so for this team because they are playing terrific football. The question for me is, and let me know how you feel about this. Shout out to Tyrone. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate the love in the chat. Great show. Thank you. Where's Stephon Diggs? He has basically gone missing. Like, hey, man, can we put out an APB on Stephon Diggs? Because I don't know where he's at this point. And neither do a lot of NFL fans and Buffalo Bills fans because he has not been a part of this offense the way that you would think a guy that's the number 1 wide receiver would be. I still think Buffalo handles their business, though. But then that gets you to Baltimore. Baltimore, no harm, no foul, lost their final regular season game to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers in the playoffs. Baltimore's got the league's MVP in Lamar Jackson. Here's why I come back to Baltimore, because I remember when I told you earlier about the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. Could you imagine if this goes chalk and the Cleveland Browns upset the Houston Texans on the road in Houston? Guess who Baltimore would be hosting in the divisional round? That's right, boys and girls. Joe Flacco and the Cleveland Browns. Could you imagine 85-year-old Joe Flacco walking his happy ass to Baltimore, where he won a Super Bowl in one of the great postseason runs in NFL history? Look it up. Go back to that 2012 year in that postseason where the Baltimore Ravens won the Super Bowl, beat San Francisco in the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Joe Flacco went one of the great postseason runs for a quarterback in NFL history. Imagine that dude now walking back to Baltimore with the Cleveland Browns trying to take them out in the divisional round. That is a nightmare for Baltimore, that the Cleveland Browns of all teams could be the one with Joe Flacco, no Deshaun Watson, and beat them in the playoffs. I don't think it necessarily happens, but it could. The reason why I say that is Cleveland's got a good defense. I talked about Micah Parsons earlier as being a defensive player of the year candidate. Myles Garrett is the same in Cleveland. He's terrific, and they know how to throw the football. Joe Flacco, as I mentioned, has been really good, but defensively, that's where the calling card is for Cleveland. If this is a team that can handle business against Houston and then find themselves going on the road to Baltimore, hey, man, that game might be a lot bit closer than what we may think. But if that doesn't happen and the Miami Dolphins, let's say, upset the Kansas City Chiefs, they would be the ones, if things hold chalk in the AFC, that would go to Baltimore. And do you remember what happened the last time the Baltimore Ravens hosted the Miami Dolphins? Yeah, the Ravens put them in the dirt. So all things are set up kind of nicely for some really juicy matchups either way. But I guess as we stand right now, that's right, Tyrone. That's right. You know what I'm talking about with Joe Flacco. Threw like 18 touchdowns and 1 interception in postseason. In fact, I'll have to go back and look at it. I think my man didn't have a single interception that postseason. He had like 12 touchdowns, 0 picks, something like that. You may have to check me on that. But either way, it was one of the greatest postseason runs that we've ever seen in NFL history by a quarterback that got him paid, remember? Because there was questions about whether or not Joe Flacco should get paid like an elite quarterback. And then he went out in the Super Bowl, or went out in the AFC playoffs, and then in the Super Bowl, and it was like, yep, I'm actually an elite quarterback, so you're going to have to pay me like one. And the Baltimore was like, well, damn it, I guess we have to. And they did. But I guess for the wild card round, I'm going to take Cleveland. I'm going to take Miami. I can't believe I'm picking against Patrick Mahomes. And I'm going to take Buffalo. So there you go. Take that for what it's worth. I think it's going to be some really good matchups. It's some really good matchups in AFC wildcard weekend and the NFC. But the NFL script, look, man, the NFL is here for the ratings. Did you know 93 of the top 100 shows in the year 2023 were NFL football games? The NFL is coming to put all of us in the dirt from a television perspective. NBA, sorry for you. Major League Baseball, good riddance. The NFL so damn bold, they came for the NBA on Christmas Day. The NBA, Christmas Day for them is traditionally, the unofficial beginning of their season. The NFL came for them and put the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers as the nightcap on Christmas Day and said, what you going to do about it? And the NBA is like, well, okay. And here we are. And now they've got the nerve to play games on Monday, Thursday, Saturday, obviously Sunday, and we have the introduction this year of Black Friday football. They're going to have us playing and watching NFL games every single day at some point down the road. I firmly believe that. Games on Monday, Tuesday, midweek NFL Wednesday games, Thursday, Friday. There's going to be games all the time. Actually, it probably won't be because, the high school football thing, and then college football is like, hey, man, Saturdays are for us. Saturdays are for us. The NFL may not give a damn, but, we'll see. But it should be a hell of a wild card weekend. I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, my eyes will be paying attention to what's going on at AT&T Stadium. I'll be in the building on Sunday in Arlington watching the Cowboys take on the Green Bay Packers to see what they do going forward there. But the NFL has set themselves up for some terrific matchups in Wild Card Weekend in both the AFC and the NFC. A lot of stars going to be out in these games. Should be a lot of fun. And by the way, for those of you who don't have Peacock, shout out to y'all, because y'all might have to get that if you're going to watch. See, I told you the NFL know what they're doing. They're like, look, let's put 2 high-power electric teams on Peacock so that all of y'all got to go get it. Now, fortunately for me, I'm a big WWE fan. Shout out to Roman Reigns and his fatal 4-way match at the Royal Rumble. I'm a Peacock person already. Pause. So I'll be able to watch the game already with, the Dolphins and the Chiefs. Good thing I already paid for that subscription among the other. Never mind. So AFC, NFC playoffs set. Wild Card Weekend, January 13th, 14th, and 15th. Games on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I know, right? Pause. Appreciate you. So let me know how you're feeling about the playoffs themselves, as far as what you think is going to happen this weekend. I want to hear from you. You let me know who you think is going to win in Wild Card Weekend and why, and I'll answer some of that throughout the course of the show. Again, it's the Gray Area Live podcast, live on Kevin Gray Sports, and here on YouTube. I'm doing that radio thing. I don't necessarily have to reset, but I'm doing it anyway because, I'm a radio guy, and that's what radio guys do. You can download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free from Tyron, who plays on Monday. That would be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Remember, last year the Cowboys had to play on that Monday night game on the road against Tampa, and they handled business. Shout out to them. Cowboys not having to worry about that disadvantage because they are able to play on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. That game's at 3:30 at AT&T Stadium. So there you go. But that's just playing on Monday. Philly, Tampa. Like I said, I'm picking Philly to win the game. I'm picking them right now. That's out of a little bit of respect for them, but I would not be surprised if Tampa gets that win. I would not be shocked at all and puts the Philadelphia Eagles out of their misery. Speaking of being put out of their misery, this whole Draymond Green thing is apparently coming to an end. So I don't know if you heard, Draymond Green has been reinstated by the NBA, and there's an excerpt of his podcast that has been circulating throughout the course of the day, where apparently he had talked with Adam Silver because, the NBA had suspended him indefinitely for 12 games, 12, 13 games, whatever it was, for after, punching Yusuf Nurkic in the face. And the NBA is like, all right, that's enough. That's enough, Draymond. We've had enough. You're curb stomping dudes in the chest. You're punching people. You're choking out Rudy Gobert. That's enough. That's enough. So Joe Dumars, Adam Silver, and the NBA suspend him for 12, 13 games. He gets on his podcast. Apparently, he says Adam Silver and him had a conversation to the point where Adam Silver allegedly had to talk him out of retirement. What? Now, Draymond, as much as you're going to be a Hall of Famer, as much as you're going to be in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, you're a multi-time NBA champion, former Defensive Player of the Year, what you retiring for? You're trying to run away from the responsibilities of you punching people in the face, choking dudes out MMA style, curb stomping individuals in the chest. What you running away from the responsibility for? Was it too much to handle for you? Apparently, according to Draymond, it was too much for him, because that's what he said to Adam Silver during his conversation, saying that, look, man, this may be too much for me. And Adam Silver said, hey, man, you might want to relax here. I think you're making a rash decision on possibly retiring. And the result being he's not going to retire. But here's the thing with this whole Draymond thing. No matter how you feel about him as a person or as a player, what he ultimately has to do is take the responsibility for what his reputation has become throughout the course of his career, because he is the only one to blame for where he is as far as how we perceive him based on the totality of his career at this point. Draymond Green is a hell of a basketball player. He runs that system for Golden State to perfection. But what he also has become is a pariah. Someone who, yes, isn't afraid to speak his mind, which I can appreciate. Hello, I run my mouth talking about sports and other things every single day. But at some point has put his team, and in some ways the league, in jeopardy with his behavior. Now, I'm not saying that Draymond Green needs to get out here and be a choir boy all the time. But what he does has to ensure that he is taking responsibility for what he has done himself, which is inflict unnecessary ridiculousness upon his organization, and more importantly, for himself and his reputation. He will never be known as a guy that was a saint. He will never be known as a guy that was a goody two shoes at all in the league. No one will ever accuse him of that. But what I'm saying is, hey, man, you did what you did. Did you get the help and did you get the counsel or whatever that you did to make sure that moving forward, you chill out a little bit? Because no one is telling you to turn down the intensity of what you are as a player. I'm not saying that. I don't want you to turn down the intensity of what you are as a player. That's part of what's made him great throughout the course of his career is his willingness to be that guy every single night. He's like a pro wrestler. He is a guy that when he gets on the floor or gets into the ring, his personality gets turned up to a 10. But that's who he is. And sometimes who he is takes it too far to the detriment of him and his teammates. And if that is the case, he has got to find a way to be much better going forward. And all of that to say is, look, man, I like Draymond as a player. He's been a hell of a player throughout the course of his career. Now it's time for him to man up and take the responsibility that ultimately he's inflicted upon himself and his team. And the way that the NBA and more importantly, how the Golden State Warriors have gone about, the handling of all this has been kind of weird. They've not really talked about him while he's been away, but yet when he was reinstated, wasn't real acknowledgement of the fact that, well, yeah, he is coming back and he's going to be finding his way to get back and ramped up for this team before he gets back on the floor. But all of this to say is, look, Draymond, I hope that you learn what you needed to, you handle your business going forward, but more importantly for the NBA, find a way to somehow ensure that for him, he continues to be on the right path based on what he needs to be as a person after basketball is over with. Because regardless of how he finishes his career, what he is going forward is all that matters for him and ultimately his family. And I would not want to be the guy that continues to be remembered as the guy that went full rear naked chokehold on Rudy Gobert, punching out individuals in the face, but also a guy who should be remembered as one of the best defensive players that we've seen and a guy that was one of the catalysts for one of the more dynastic runs in NBA history. It's not anything that we're talking about with Draymond at this point. And that's on him, not anybody else. So he ultimately alone has got to be the guy that going forward here is able to handle his business. Because look, man, as much as I've lamented and not been able to stand the Warriors over the last, 13, 14 years, they have been amazing for the game of basketball. Klay Thompson, Stephen Curry becoming the greatest shooter that we've ever seen. Draymond Green leading that team. Yes, I know Mark Jackson probably still should have been the head coach, but, that whole thing is, in the past now. And Steve Kerr winning multiple titles, even the title they won a couple of years ago, no one really expected them to be back at that position based off of the injuries and everything that they've suffered. And yet they found a way to get back to the mountaintop. Again, that was in part because Draymond Green was that dude. What he is at 33, 34 years old now ultimately is the question, because that team right now, they are not good. Golden State is not good at all. And the thing is, no one fears them. I was watching the Denver game the other night when Nikola Jokic and that team walked them down closing the game. What was it, a 25-4 run? And Nikola Jokic hit that insane three-point shot from 39 feet away. No one's scared of the Golden State Warriors anymore. Draymond Green, at least in some ways, is able to provide a measure of consistency for them on both ends of the floor with his passing and his defense. And I don't know how much of that he has anymore. But what he can't be is that dude out here making a mess of his basketball team, putting them in bad positions to not be able to succeed without him. They started off okay without him going, I believe, 5-3 initially, but things have kind of bottomed out from there. Once he returns, can Draymond not only stay on the floor, but be a more quote-unquote productive citizen in the NBA? Because if he can't, the suspension that he just received and is coming back from, and if he gets another one, who knows how long he may come back after that. We'll see. But chill out, Draymond. You're not retiring. And I don't want you to retire. We don't want you to retire. Finally, here on the Gray Area Podcast today, before I get out of here, I want to touch on the Mavericks real quick, because the Mavericks right now are playing some good basketball, man. They've won 3 straight games. Kyrie Irving being veteran leader guy for this team, as the Mavericks, of course, beat the Minnesota Timberwolves 115-108 on Sunday to get their third straight win as they're in the middle of their season-long 7-game homestand. And Kyrie Irving, I give him a lot of credit, man. You want to talk about maturity? We were talking about Draymond Green just a second ago. You want to talk about maturity? Kyrie Irving has always wanted to fashion himself as leader guy. And that's necessarily hasn't worked out, whether it was in Boston, whether it was in Brooklyn. It never really worked out for him. At this stage of his career, though, you can tell that he's embracing what it means to be alongside a superstar in Luka Doncic. A much more mature Kyrie Irving we've seen over the last several days, even in the loss against Utah, where Kyrie had 9 rebounds. In fact, over his last, 4 games now, my man's got 35 rebounds, one of the best rebounding guards in the league right now, which is interesting, the fact that he's in his early 30s doing such a thing. But at the same time, you're seeing him diving on the floor for loose balls, being a guy that's leading by example with his play on the floor. And for him, that's a welcome sign for Luka Doncic in this team. Luka Doncic is a supernova. We know that he's one of the 5 best players in the NBA and is arguably the best player on the floor every single night he steps on to the floor for the Mavericks. But what the Mavericks have lacked over the last several years in the Luka Doncic era is a true leader guy. Well, you say Dwight Powell has been there as a veteran, has been there for a long time. JJ Barea was there for a little bit. But no one has been as talented as Kyrie, and now to this point willing to do the other stuff that sometimes Luka Doncic is not able to do, not necessarily because he isn't capable of doing it, but because his body won't necessarily allow him to. Luka Doncic is battling through a quad injury, battling through an ankle injury, and you saw that take a little bit of a toll on him last night in the game, where Kyrie Irving closed the show, hitting the tying three-pointer and the go-ahead three-pointer to beat the Minnesota Timberwolves, where the Mavericks went on a 15-2 run to close that game. But for Kyrie now, this is a chance at this stage of his career to prove that all the things that he's gone through, all the fanfare, positive or otherwise, has now got him to a space where he could truly be the leader guy that he's always sought to be. And if that's the case, the Mavericks could be in a good position to maybe make a little bit of a run here. They've beat up on some bad teams. They're 14-3 against sub-500 teams this year, so they're beating up on a bunch of teams that aren't really good. But they finally got a statement and a signature win on Sunday that me and others have been looking for who cover this team, which is you beat the best defensive team in the league, who has the best record in the Western Conference, but you did it on the strength of your 2 superstars who combined for 69 points. And for Kyrie, a hell of a fourth quarter with the 8 points that he had, having the 2 biggest buckets of the game, ultimately giving the Mavericks a lead that they wouldn't relinquish against Minnesota. But in part, he was doing the other things as well. And if you're going to get that kind of effort from Kyrie Irving at this stage of his career, everyone else is going to have to fall in line. Luka is going to set the tone for everything he does offensively. We know that. But it's all the other stuff. I said coming into the year, if the Mavericks could find a way to be somewhat average defensively, they're going to win a bunch of ball games because they're going to outscore a lot of teams every night, with Luka and Kyrie leading that offense for the Mavericks. But if Kyrie is truly morphing into the kind of leader that he thought he was going to be when he was in Boston, then that bodes well for the Mavericks and takes some pressure off of Luka Doncic. Well, Luka, he will say he's the leader of this team. And yes, in some respects, and in most respects, that is, he is. But what he is a guy that still needs to look for some guidance for someone who's been there and done that. And for all the negativity that has been there, guess what? Kyrie Irving's hit some of the biggest shots in NBA history. Hello, Golden State. So that means that he has a chance to learn from someone who's been there, done that, and ultimately has been able to achieve what he has not, which is win an NBA championship. From my man BD, KG, the Derrick Jones Jr. edition has been one of the biggest steals, but is he too small to be our 4? What can we do to upgrade that spot? Seems to be our biggest weakness with a 4 with size. Appreciate the question there. And big shout out to Derrick Jones Jr. because he was great last night. 12 points, 10 rebounds. My man had 3 blocks. He had a hell of a weak side block on Rudy Gobert, putting on a monster block on him. But yeah, that's something that the Mavericks have got to find a way to get bigger in, is their front line. because Grant Williams is undersized. You thought him coming into this team, he could play and defend multiple positions, but so far, the Mavericks front court has just simply not been there. And part of that is some of the health, of course, with Derek Lively II, who has been missing some games here in the recent weeks because, of two separate left ankle sprains. But if the Mavericks are able to maybe, I don't know, a PJ Washington potentially, from Charlotte, we heard reporting today from Shams Charania that the Mavericks aren't necessarily too keen on the idea of paying the price for Pascal Siakam or Jeremy Grant. They'll need to find a way to make something happen, but upgrade their 4 spot because they need some more size there. Despite the fact that they beat Minnesota, they were out-rebounded 51-44. In fact, they got crushed on the offensive boards in the first half in that game, specifically in the first quarter, where Rudy Gobert tore them up on the glass. And against bigger teams, they're going to have a problem. But what they've got to do ultimately, like they did in the second half of the game, they got to be able to rebound as a team. And if they can hold steady for most nights. But yeah, they've got to find a way to upgrade the power forward position to get some more out of that, because otherwise, if they don't, teams are going to be able to beat them up pretty good. BD again, Dorian Finney-Smith would have fit perfectly. Maybe they can find a way to get him back. Look, man, as much as I love Dorian Finney-Smith, I feel like, and this is no shade to Dorian because I love Dorian. Dodo was fantastic here. They reached that apex with him and that team during the Western Conference final run. Is he still a good basketball player? Yeah, but I feel like we saw the peak of his power for what it was when they made that Western Conference finals run against the Golden State Warriors. I don't know how much more he adds. Well, yes, he'll be comfortable in Dallas. Let me not say that. He'll be very comfortable here in Dallas playing alongside Luka Doncic, and I'm sure he doesn't want to have another, miracle 3 hit in his face like Luka did earlier this year. But I don't know with Dorian Finney-Smith and what you may be able to get him on the cheap, and maybe that's the attraction, is that you wouldn't have to necessarily give up much to get Dorian Finney-Smith back here. But I would be interested to see how that looks here. I think the better move would be to get a guy like a PJ Washington potentially from Charlotte. He would definitely serve as an upgrade, here in Dallas. But I like the thought, though. I love Dorian Finney-Smith. And honestly, I wish they didn't have to give him up in order to get Kyrie Irving. But hey, last night's game is the reason why you brought Kyrie Irving to this team. The way that he closed the fourth quarter, the shot making, and the willingness to take those shots as someone other than Luka willing to do that, that's the exact reason why you got Kyrie Irving to play for the Dallas Mavericks, to help you close games when Luka sometimes is not able to. And you saw that come to full fruition against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So Kyrie, shout out to him, man. Playing some good basketball, doing all the little things. He talked about it over the last couple of post games. He's doing all the other things to help this team win and serving as an example to his teammates that ultimately should hopefully prove to be good for them throughout the rest of the season. They've got John Morant on Tuesday. Then they welcome in Jalen Brunson and the New York Knicks, and then Zion Williamson and the Pelicans for the last 2 games of their 7-game homestand as they look to make it 4 in a row when they take on Memphis on Tuesday. John Morant, by the way, John Morant didn't even play on Sunday for the Grizzlies. They still found a way to beat the Phoenix Suns there on the road. I don't know what the hell's going on in Phoenix. That thing is broken, it feels like. I don't know what they do there. But John Morant didn't even have to play for the Grizzlies to take out the Suns in Phoenix. He should be good to go and ready to play on Tuesday against Luka Doncic and the Mavericks. We'll see if Luka's ready to play as he's dealing with that, right ankle swelling, and Derek Lively II as far as his left ankle is concerned. Dante Exum has been really good for them. Has been missing the last few games with a heel contusion of his own. So the Mavericks got to find a way to get healthy and stay healthy for them to have that kind of consistency going forward. That's it for today's show. Really appreciate you hanging out with me here on the Gray Area Podcast Live here. I apologize for the technical difficulties a little bit earlier on in the show, and I had to restart the show, but I appreciate you hanging out with me, coming back in here once again. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. Episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I have my interview Wednesdays, and then my Friends Friday. Reg Atatula is going to be joining me every single Friday moving forward here. Of course, my former partner over at The Fan, he will be with me every single Friday for Friends Friday, as we'll get you ready for the wildcard matchups, this coming weekend. But interview Wednesdays and then Friends Friday with Reg Atatula. Shout out to, who is this? Let me make sure I put that in there. Shout out to my fellow Missouri brethren. That's right. Shout out to you. Appreciate you. But again, subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. Also, download and subscribe to the Gray Area Podcast wherever you get podcasts for free. Appreciate you listening and watching the Gray Area Podcast live. I'll be back on Wednesday for Interview Wednesdays. Get you ready for, I don't know, NFL, NBA, all kinds of stuff. We'll talk it all right here on the Gray Area Podcast. I'll talk to you later. Peace.